skip that. Okay, and this is that coercion. This is really small for me to read. I can't remember the guy's name, but this was a coercion of war. These tactics were used to brainwash a prisoner of war. However, if you notice, threats, occasional indulgence, monopolizing of perception, isolation, all of those things. Prisoner of war, someone for trafficking. Those things unfortunately align. It's kind of why we identify this. It's Beardman's part of coercion. Victims may not self-identify because of the following. They don't know what their rights are. They believe they'll go to jail because of it. They don't want their trafficker to go to jail. They're afraid of what can happen if they get out of jail, or what a friend of that trafficker will do. What that, they have things like tops and bottoms, and they have, they refer to them as stables, and they have different hierarchies. Women are the ones who are under the trafficker because they seem softer and nicer and more friendly. That kind of a thing.
Some of them are watching their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Their mom. That's at least one case.
Yep. And so they become attached to their trafficker. They believe that they're their boyfriend, or they blame themselves for what's happening to them. I did this to get in this situation, so they're blaming themselves. And of course, that threatening of violence. And not knowing their rights is a big one. They really think that they're going to go to jail for prostitution, or you sold this, or I'm going to show your parents these photos, or I'm going to turn these photos into the cops. And not knowing what their rights really are when it comes to being a victim of trafficking. Not trust others enough to disclose. That's a big one as well. So characteristics of trafficking survivors. I'm not going to read you all of these statistics. However, typically the one that I like to point out is that 59% grew up without a father in the home. I point out that one because a couple years ago I was attending a conference, Free the Captives, and there was an FBI agent who specifically worked on cases of trafficking where he would arrest traffickers, and he played an interview tape of a trafficker, and he says something along the lines of, again, my notes aren't here so I'm not going to get it completely straight, but I want to thank all the dads out there who didn't do their job, who left. I want to thank you guys. Essentially, he filled the spot of that father figure. And so, basically preying upon that need of a father figure in their lives. These statistics, although I don't have it at the bottom there of where they came from, they come from West Coast, I think it's on the next one. West Coast Clinic in California, who developed the See It tool. They're the ones who pulled up those stats. I get that question a lot of where those stats come from, and I narrowed it down to West Coast Clinic in California, who developed the See It tool that you guys are going to start implementing and that we use on a regular basis. So very briefly into the See It tool. This is a tool to use to identify survivors of trafficking or someone who possibly is showing risk indicators of becoming a victim of trafficking. You'll hear me use victim and survivor interchangeably. I understand that victim is currently being victimized, survivor is after the fact, but in our program, all of them are survivors to us, even if they are being trafficked. So I apologize if that's confusing. I usually try to use victims so you guys know, but it's such a common thing for me to just say survivor. But with that, the See It tool is developed to find our kiddos who are being trafficked. What are their indicators? It's not an interview tool. It's all about looking at the information that we have. It's not asking if they're being trafficked. It's saying, okay, do they show these risk factors? And we're going to go through what those risk factors are as we move through. Our advocates repeat the See It tool every 90 days. And so it is a tool that is being widely used and it is spreading across the state of Texas and in the country, of course. DFPS does use it. However, does anybody want to guess how many counties in DFPS use it? 5. 5 counties use the See It tool. That's it. I just learned that this past week. I was like, only 5 counties are using the See It tool? That's it? That's it. And of course, it's our major ones, you know, Harris County, up in Dallas, whatever county that is, Austin, whatever county that is, of course. But that's not enough.
I was gonna say, like, when it comes to Houston, And then Montgomery County has a lot of like drug use, because they come from Houston and then they go down to Montgomery County here and go into like the San Houston National Forest. So
Yep.
like I feel like rural areas need to be even more aware of it because they know that they're not looking for it. So.
Absolutely. Of course, the rural areas do need to be cautious of it because more can go under the radar in the rural counties because it's more spread out. If you, I believe it's the Attorney General, there's a video on trafficking on their website, and that video actually spotlights Madisonville. It shows the Buc-ee's, it shows all of that, and it highlights a case that came through. And so I was like, whoa, that's the Buc-ee's I always stop at. That's just outside Huntsville.
I work at TDCJ and we had to go through a whole course on this.
Mhm.
And we saw that one.
Yeah, so, so different departments are using it. I know that I'm supposed to be scheduling a training with San Jacinto, juvenile justice. And so he reached out and he's like, we need a training. We have the See It tool, but then after we do the See It tool, where are we supposed to send them? Like what resources do we have? And so it's hard. It's hard when you're in the rural counties and resources are so centered in one area.
So they've been putting on, I've noticed ads on television where the child, you see the child in behind her, she's doing her hand like this. Are there signals that we need to be aware of, or that children need to be aware of? That have you seen that ad that I'm talking about?
I just learned that this past
But
week.
you kids know it.
No.
So I mean, who knows it?
Yeah. So there's definitely hand signals. We're gonna get into tattoos and things like that to identify types of clothing, all of that stuff to kind of look at. Where are we at on time? Okay, we got a little bit of time. Might have to keep. I'm like talking a lot. It's me. I'm not used to doing it like this anymore. So, but with that, yes, there's lots of different things, hand signals, stuff like that, verbiage, all of those things that can be identified. But with that See It tool, it breaks down what those indicators are. Tattoos are a big one. I haven't seen that commercial. Unfortunately, I don't have television. I have Netflix, Hulu, that kind of a thing. Yes?
No, that,
Oh.
I was just thinking.
Yeah.
You probably
So,
saw the
I
same
haven't
ad I
seen
did.
it.
It's interesting.
Yeah. But definitely some hand signals and stuff like that is definitely a part of it as well. But just to, I'm not gonna obviously not training you on the See It tool, but I'm going to show you kind of what those risk factors are that identify those different buckets that the See It tool identifies. And so that first bucket is at housing and caregiving. Is the survivor possibly homeless? Have they had periods of homelessness? Have they ran away from home? Have they had any current involvement with the child welfare system? All of that falls into that indicator box of unstable housing and caregiving. So let's say that youth has had involvement with DFPS. Let's say they have had that running away from home. Okay, those are indicators. So we're checking off those boxes. Moving on to that next one. Is there any other prior abuse or trauma? Have they been sexually abused? Have they had any physical abuse? Any sort of domestic violence? Have they been witness to it? Even if they're not the ones being victimized, has their mom, their dad, have they come from that kind of a home? Okay, we're checking that off as a possible indicator. That next one, that physical and health appearance. Are they sleep deprived? Are they coming into school sleep deprived? Do they have any signs of physical trauma? Bruises, black eyes, cigarette burns, broken bones? Anything that would identify. Their hygiene changes, their appearance changes. They go from, maybe dressing like a normal kid, and all of a sudden they're covering their body. They're wearing a hoodie when it's 90 degrees outside with 75% humidity in Texas. They're trying to cover their body. Or it could be the opposite way. They're wearing more risque clothing. They are, or flashier clothing. Where'd you get that bag? Where'd you get that? Where'd you get this? Things that are unexplained. Substance use impacts their health. What is that substance use? Were they using substance before? Are they using it now? That kind of a thing is all checked off in this one. And of course those tattoos and branding, that's a big one. Very, very large one. I mean, the problem with this is that everybody has tattoos. Maybe not everybody, but the variety of tattoos out there, they range. And I have tattoos, but you would never know if it was a branding tattoo versus a regular tattoo. And so the things to look for are barcodes, lips, initials, names, hearts, anything that like branding of a cow or a horse or something like that. Because like I mentioned, sometimes they call it their stable of women. And so identifying what those tattoos are. Now what I will say is that when I was with Freedom Place and I was training trafficking with them, I had a volunteer who said, I saw 2 or 3 women with the same tattoo. Okay, that's more concerning. That's more like, why do they all have the same initials? Or why do they all have the horseshoe? Or why do they all have whatever it is? Oftentimes you can ask them, hey, that's a cool tattoo, where'd you get that? Why did you get that? And see if they're uncomfortable. Maybe they do a long pause. Maybe no one's ever asked them before. And so just things like that when it comes to tattoos. Our other PowerPoint are money signs, money bags. All of those are big ones too. Gang symbols, it can be anything. But just kind of looking at, you know, our youth, who their friends are, do they have the same tattoos, that kind of a thing. But I had a volunteer who was becoming a volunteer say, I was at the grocery store and I saw 3 girls with the same tattoo on the side of their neck. And I asked them. She's like, I asked him, and I'm like, well, that was brave. I asked him, and she, I think, I don't know, they all said they had the same boyfriend, whatever it was, and of course she called into the hotline, whatever it is. She's like, that's not normal. Well, that boyfriend was the trafficker. So, just looking for those kind of identifying marks. Moving on to that next one, environment and exposure. Youth spends time where exploitation is occurring. Yeah, I've hung out on Bissonnet Street in Houston. I've hung out in this area where drugs are known, or I've hung out in this area or that area, or I have a friend who's has been trafficked or has had sex for money. Any kind of involvement to it, any kind of association, prostitution. Oh, I went to a strip club once, and you know they're not old enough. Whatever it is, any kind of involvement that way. Or the youth is being bullied or targeted. Involvement with juvenile justice, gang affiliation is a big one. We definitely saw a rise in that mainly in California. Same thing with here in Texas, but they say you can sell a gun once, you can sell a person over and over again. And so gangs became very smart in what that looks like. Our organization has actually developed a gangs training that we can, if you guys would like a gangs training, we have that option as well. I'm not super educated in it, so I haven't been like, hey, I'll train it for y'all. But we do have individuals that we work with that are very expert in that. But gangs are definitely come around to using that as a way to profit. And of course, relationship and personal belongings. Does the youth appear to have any unhealthy or inappropriate romantic relationships? Presence of an older adult boyfriend. I would like to note here, we're not talking 3 years, we're not talking 4 years, 15. Old enough to be their dad. Old enough, significantly older, doesn't make sense. Where did you even meet this individual? That kind of a thing. Paying attention to what that looks like. Explicit photos on their phone. Did you see a photo on their Instagram and you're like, where is this coming from? Or it's flipping through their phone, they accidentally swipe past one. All of that can be indicators of a risk factor. Excessive money or gifts, hotel keys, multiple cell phones, urgency to answer their phone at a certain time. Sometimes what we see is that if I don't answer my phone when so-and-so calls, like, that's a big issue. Why would they not want to be friends with you anymore if you don't answer your phone at 12 o'clock? That doesn't make sense. So, youth travels to places that are inconsistent with their life circumstances. They're going to San Antonio for the weekend with friends, and they're 16. Where'd you stay? How is that funded? Figuring out what that looks like as far as stuff that's not consistent with their lifestyle. One week they're asking you for $15, the next week they have $300. That kind of a thing is all what to look for. Signs of current trauma. So, of course, if the youth appears on edge, preoccupied, hypervigilant, youth has difficulty detecting or responding to dangerous cues. We see this a lot. Not knowing what's safe or unsafe, any kind of risky behavior, self-destructive, high level of distress, accessible to your cell phone. All of that falls under that category of signs of current trauma. Coercion. So the youth is being controlled or coerced by another person. Abusive, controlling spouse, boyfriend, whatever it is. Oftentimes we see with our survivors, I can't talk to you anymore, he doesn't want me to talk to you anymore, leave me alone. That domestic violence situation that starts one way and turns into another. Youth is coerced into getting pregnant, having an abortion, or using contraception. We've seen it. What we find is with this one, a lot of times it is what gets them out of the life if they have. If they were coerced into getting pregnant, unfortunately, what we see is that if they do have an advocate, oftentimes that's that push. That's that push to get out of the life because they see what can happen to their kiddo. Someone is not allowing the youth to sleep regularly. The youth and their friends or family and acquaintances receive threats, and of course misleading information about their age, whereabouts, residence, or relationship. Inconsistent age, name, those kinds of things are big as well. 16 one minute, 20 the next. You can tell they're not that age, that kind of a thing. And then of course, exploitation. You know the youth has exchanged money for sex. You know that there's a trafficker present. They've exchanged it for any kind of goods. Youth has watched or filmed pornography. History of sexual exploitation. Obviously, that's our main big indicator there. But what the See It tool does, it's concern, clear concern, anywhere on that spectrum. We're trying to identify it. And so if there is risky behaviors, maybe they're not being trafficked, it's still important to get somebody involved so it doesn't end up that way. So now what? You have identified a potential victim of sex trafficking but not sure what to do. First and foremost, always following our internal procedures, especially with CASA. First and foremost, you want to go to someone within. I'm not sure if it would be. I was like, it's probably Janet, but it's probably. I was like, wait, I think she's training. Over here, go ahead and of course, reporting it within DFPS, reporting to the Child Abuse Hotline, all of the internal procedures, getting permission from DFPS to contact us as an agency. DFPS is usually really good about saying yes, of course, no big deal. They know who we are. We have a statewide MOU. And if they don't know who they are, they don't know who we are, they should, and I can definitely train them. And that kind of a thing. But making sure we're always following internal procedures. We never want to skip any steps, of course. So now, this is the common thread portion. I can definitely do it in 30 minutes. Do we need a break?
Okay, so I told them it was 5:30 to 7.
Oh,
so
okay. Well,
I'm good.
I don't want to keep anybody longer. I'm so sorry. So sorry. We can do one of two things. I can keep going for anybody who wants to keep going, and then we can schedule another portion of virtual via Zoom for that 30-minute portion. It's completely up to y'all. I don't want to force anybody to stay. You have to go to work. Okay, no problem. No problem. I mean, that's a valid reason. Totally get it. I am so sorry. Normally it's usually faster online because you're not chit-chatting, but I can definitely, your emails there, I can send more resources and stuff, and we host community presentations that anyone can attend. So.
I definitely wanted to get your contact information because, like I said, I'm a student. I graduate in a couple weeks. I'm really
in a couple
interested in
weeks,
this.
that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
So.
Congratulations.
So Kaylee, I'll get you her information.
Thank you.
Yes. I don't want to hold anybody here longer than they want to be, so I can go into this another time. It's up to you. No one's gonna shame
I
you.
say we're here. Maybe we'll finish it. I don't know.
Yeah, I can stop. I mean, yeah, go to the bathroom, do whatever you need to do, and well, yeah.